So, my dear friends, India and Pakistan, two countries in South Asia, they have rich history and their culture that is quite interesting. So, today in my this introductory lecture, I would like to discuss some basic details and to give you a kind of inspiration and motivation that this subject can be highly interesting. So India and Pakistan, India has more than 1 billion, and Pakistan is 220 million people country. So how these countries, they got their development, and we have great civilizations like Hinduism and Buddhism, Islam, Jainism, and many other religions and cultures. So this is a kind of amalgam, a kind of mixture of so many civilizations, and especially when we focus people like Ashoka and others, so that is quite interesting. But today I will focus more on Muslim period of Indo-Pakistan history. And Muslims, when they came to India, so they first came for trade. Trade, that was the most important element. And then in Malabar and the southern Indian continent, we have seen, mosque and other Muslim reminiscence. Before Muhammad bin Qasim, who is, the famous leader who came, and he came to Dibal. Nowadays it is called Karachi, and he was sent by Hajjaj bin Yusuf. So there are many theories, and one theory that is like the pirates and the people, the Sassanid Empire. At that time, the Iranian dynasty was called Sassanid, and Arabs at that time they were fighting against Sassanid, Iranian, and the Iranian would come to India and they would take refuge. So the enemy of the enemy is a friend, and the friend of enemy is your enemy. That is a basic theory of international relations and world history. So Arab rulers, they told the Umayyads at that time, the Dibal or the Raja Dahir and other rulers, that they should not give refuge to them and they should hand over those refugees to Arabs. But as he refused, so then the next step, that was only invasion. So that was a strategic decision, that if they won't invade on Sin at that time, so Sin will become a place, and they will make an alliance with Persia, with Iran at that time. So then these two will become quite strong enemies for Arabs. So that's why they wanted to deliberate, they wanted to make it weak, this alliance, and then they invaded. There are some romantic stories that there was some woman, or one woman, and she cried for the help from Hijaj bin Yusuf, and then he sent his nephew to attack. So it may be a kind of emotional touch to the history, but basically that was a strategic invasion from Umayyads on Sin, and when they came to Sin, so they attacked. Their administration, that was quite tolerant. They also recruited like the local people. They were Hindus and Buddhists. Basically, the Sin ruler at that time, he was Hindu, but the majority of population, they were Buddhist. So even some Buddhist and some other local people, they also cooperated with Arabs, and that's why Muhammad bin Qasim was quite, he got hold of Sin in a very easy way. Their strategy was that involvement of the local people, and for example, for economic and financial institutions, their administrators were mainly from the local population. So this was one of the important element of their administration, that you cannot like impose your whole system on the local population. When you give the local people a sense of ownership, so then they become your allies, they become your friends, instead of becoming your enemies, and that's why they got a strong hold. And till today, Sindh, that is a Muslim area, because the beginning, that was not too bad. Basically it was strategic, that was political reasons and administrative reasons. That's why Muslims, they got hold of Sindh at that time. But they could not go beyond Multan, because again that was a tragedy, and in dynasties these things happen. Then when Hajjaj bin Yusuf was no more there, the favorite, so then Muhammad bin Qasim was recalled, and then the recall story is also quite interesting. In a very humiliating way, he was recalled, and you have the details in history books. So they reached up to Multan. Now, this is very interesting that instead of Arabs, this was Muhammad of Ghazna who came from western part, and then he attacked like 17 times on India. And when in 999, when he was like endorsed by the caliphs, Abbasid caliph at that time, because there were no more Umayyads, because Abbasids they controlled now the Muslim empire, Arab empire. So they recognized Muhammad of Ghazna. And then he decided that each year he will attack India as an allegiance to the Abbasid Caliphate. And then he would attack. And basically, his personality is also quite interesting. Many people consider him to be a Muslim hero, and his wars were called jihad, and that was just to convert the local people. But that is not reality. The reality was just economic reasons. He was a politician at that time. He was a ruler, and he would expand, because he started from Iran, the today the eastern part of Iran, and then Afghanistan, today's Afghanistan, and today's Pakistan. It became parts of his empire. So that was annexation, that was expansion of his territory. That was the main reason, and also economic booty, and many people even call him plunderer. That he would plunder the treasures of India, and then he would build Ghazni, his capital, on that treasure, on that wealth that he would amass, he would collect from India. Interesting thing is that he had a complete contingent of Hindu and non-Muslim soldiers with their own commander, and that commander and those soldiers would fight against their own fellows, Hindus fellows or Christians, and they would kill them, and Muslims would kill Muslims, because Mahmud of Ghazna, he killed Ismailis in Multan, and they were Muslims. So that was basically political, economic, and annexation, expansion. Those were not like some religious or moral or ethical, although sometimes you use these slogans for your propaganda, just to convince your soldiers and to motivate them, so that they can go and they can attack on their enemy, and that's why some slogans are used. But the basic purpose, that was political, economic, administrative, and expanding the empire. But Mahmud of Ghazna could not establish his own empire or sultanate or caliphate in India. These were the sultans of Delhi, Delhi Sultanate, that they, Qutbuddin Aibak, and then we have great men like Ghazuddin Tughlaq and Alauddin Khilji, and up to Ibrahim Ludi. They were like great sultans of Delhi. And Alauddin Khilji, he was a great administrator. He introduced like price control and many other measures. And for the first time, tell Ibrahim Ludi, the Delhi Sultanate, they had also Bengal Sultanate and Deccan Sultanate, but Delhi Sultanate, that was the most organized way, because Mahmud of Ghazni, he would come from Afghanistan, Ghazni, and then he would attack, he would invade, he would stay for some time, then he would leave his successor, his governor, and then he would go back. But Qutbuddin Aibak and Delhi Sultans, they were the first rulers, the original real Muslim rulers, that they established their rule in Delhi. So this Delhi Sultanate is a very very important era, and their administrative reforms and measures that they took, that is quite interesting, and we can see that recently there was a movie from India, so and that Alauddin Khilji was presented. So that maybe there is some exaggeration in that movie, but because of his strategic measures, and because of his vision, and because of his realism, he would not be like an idealist king, and he would be a noble person, and he would be like using some ethical and moral values, but for his own benefits. He might have not got that much involvement with that princess, but that he might have used that as a tactic to attack their stronghold, and to get control on to expand the frontiers of his. We have people like Balban and Ghasuddin Tughlaq, and then we have Sayyids and Ludis. And then Ludis were defeated again by other Muslims, and they were Mughals, Babar, and then Akbar and Jahangir and Shah Jahan, and till Aurangzeb Alamgir, who was Aurangzeb Alamgir was the last major Mughal king, then till Bahadur Shah Zafar, 1857, when he was finally defeated and he was overthrown by British Empire. So this whole era that we have, that is quite interesting. The most important, another very important ruler, that is Suri. And Suri dynasty. That is very much interesting because their land reforms, their land settlement system. That today we have this Patwari and Gurdwara, and how to measure the land and all these things. This was by Farid Khan Suri, or Sher Shah Suri. And then Humayun was again a very charismatic person, although we don't remember. But the greatest was Akbar. And Akbar, his Dini Ilahi, and then his reforms and his reconciliation with the majority Hindu population. Akbar and Aurangzeb both were in contrast. Aurangzeb wanted to impose Sharia and Islamic system in the whole non-Muslim empire, and that's why he was defeated. While Akbar was the great because he would reconcile with the local population, and then he would be like having a good relationship with the Hindu majority population, and he married even with them. And then he tried to invent a new religion in which there would be basic elements from all the important religions of that time. So this shows his tolerance and his policy of coexistence. That in such a huge empire, you cannot make the majority of population as your enemy. When Aurangzeb Alamgir started to impose his own version, and then from there, even he fought with his Muslims, like Pashtuns, Khushal Khan Khatak in the west, and he would fight. He fought with his own brothers and with his own father. So this religion is not that important element, but they were strategists. They were like good empire builders, and they would expand. But some policies, as Indo-Pak history analyst and expert, we have to focus on their motives, their policies, and their strategies. That how, for example, the first battle of Panipat was by Babur. How he won against Ibrahim Lodi. What was his strategy, and how Sher Shah Suri, he defeated the son of Babur, and then how Humayun comes back and he defeats the sons of Sher Shah Suri. And then what were the empire building techniques and measures and the steps that were taken by Akbar, and then Jahangir and Shah Jahan. So their architecture, we have to see, their art and literature, and the evolution of Persian language, and then the poetry, Amir Khusro, and then Sufism, Tasawwuf, especially starting from Amir Khusro, and then the Delhi Sultans, what they were like sponsoring. So there are good aspects, there were bad aspects at that time when they were building Taj Mahal. So Cambridge and Oxford universities were built in Europe. So their focus there were more like on architecture, and that architecture was more like religious, and there was no any such educational or philosophical or intellectual moments. Although in Akbar court, there would be Muladu Piazza and Birbal, and a lot of discussions between philosophers and religious mullahs. And we have Dar Shakwa, son of Shah Jahan, who was killed by Aurangzeb Alamgir. He was such a great intellectual personality at that time. Even Iran, the people, the Iranian poets, they were persecuted by the local Iranian rulers, and they would come to India and they would take refuge. And that's why we have huge. Sobki Hindi is the school of Hindi Persian literature. And till Iqbal, even Ghalib and Iqbal, they did a lot of Persian poetry. So this was because of Mughals and Sultans when they introduced Persian language. And then we have Sufis, Mayunuddin Chishti and Nizamuddin Awliya, and all these great people. When they introduced Islam as a religion with peaceful means, it was not always sword, but it was also the message of Sufis, the peace message. And that's why Sufis, they would go along with the local population and they would love them. there were some aggressive kind of people and they would convert people by force, and others were such that they were tolerant. So as Indo-Pak history experts, we have to analyze the motives, the analysis, the strategies, not only the historic events that what Alauddin Khilji did or what Ibrahim Lodi did or what Sher Shah Suri, just the events, narration of events. That is also important for our analysis. For example, if you want to show that Sher Shah Suri was successful, so how he was successful, what was the strategy, in which battle he defeated Humayun, or how Babur he defeated Ibrahim Lodi, and how Qutbuddin Aibak he established the first Delhi Sultanate. So we should have as a whole this whole concept clear to us. And Indo-Pak history is a very very interesting subject, and there are some like land reforms and currency uh, reforms of Sher Shah Suri, which till the British time, they even appreciated and they implemented their own system based on Sher Shah Suri. Even the price control system of Alauddin Khilji, that was so popular at that time. So there were good aspects, there were bad aspects. That was at that time empire building times, and Delhi Sultans, so great people they were, the only people that they could defeat Mongols. The people of Changiz Khan, Hilaku Khan, they were defeated by the sultans of Delhi. It was such a great thing. Nobody, even Abbasids in Baghdad, they could not face Mongols, but the sultans of Delhi, yes, they would control them, Balban and others. If you read their history, so you will get a lot of inspiration that they did good things. So we have to understand history at that time in the context. But if some people consider them just crusaders and they would do it only for jihad or that was religious motives, so that is totally wrong approach. We have to study them as politicians, as statesmen, as soldiers, as commanders, as strategists, that they would make their own strategy, their own vision, their own objectives, their action plan. We have to study that how they would attack their mission, what was their mission, what was behind that. So we have to analyze this all the things in detail, and then we can have a real picture of the strategies, and we can learn that how intelligent they were, how creative they were, that minority of Muslims, Afghans and Turkish and Arabs, they would come and they would defeat majority of Hindus, and even they will not only conquer and impose and force their stay and their presence. As you read Tuski Babari of Babur, you will be astonished the way he presents India. The beauty of India and the seasons of India and the people of India. So they would not only impose, but they will also win their hearts. So that is a lot of interesting history. We will continue such discussions. This was just a kind of motivational lecture that Indo-Pak history is not boring. It is very very interesting, and we can see that how majority comes and rule majority. And when British introduces the concept of democracy, then Muslims of India become quite sensitive, and they have, it is an alarming effect on them, that if we were in minority but we were ruling, and now we are in minority, so we have to take safeguards, and then at the result of those safeguards we have a new country, and that is Pakistan. So we will continue these discussions. Thank you.